Welcome back to the Dr. SuperCoach YouTube. It's Pig and I'm welcoming you back for the final week of Captain Recommendations. The final round of the SuperCoach season. We are here, round 24. I hope you made it through to your league grand finals. And look, picking a captain can set you apart from your opponents, so you are here and you're in the right place. In the final round of the season, we'll see some teams out of the finals, looking to put their feet up, have a bit of a rest, maybe try some new players. But there's a lot of AFL teams still jockeying for the top 8 or top 4 with a lot to play for. So trying to predict a team or a player's motivation coming in the final round of the season can add a bit of extra fun to the formula. Last week, my top 5 captain recommendations put up scores of 141, 122, 123, 146 and 142. That might have been my most successful captain recommending week of the year, so quite happy with that. Hopefully you got on to one or two of them. Unfortunately, my team doesn't own any of them, but that isn't the point of these videos. I've had a lot of fun this year doing this research and recommending the best captain options so that you don't have to. You can just listen to this video and go, cool, that one and that one. So thanks for all your support and all the kind words in the comments. I've definitely taken notice of them. They've made me keep wanting to do it. So that's been a really good community we've got going here. So I appreciate it. So on that note, let's get into this week's recommendations and end the season with a bang. Now, I don't think this is going to be a big scoring week like we had. Last week was pretty big, but obviously the week before was massive. There's some pretty tricky matchups this week, so I'm not saying necessarily take a 125, but maybe I am. It's kind of a week where I probably would be taking that this week, or maybe even a 120. So let's get into it. Number 3 VC is Nick Daicos. In any other universe, a Nick Daicos VC on a Friday night against the leakiest midfield in the comp would be a slam dunk pick. My concern here is the Alex Neil-Bullen tag, which did limit him to only 64 points in round 13. Now, in that game, Collingwood still won. So Melbourne have to ask themselves, did the tag really work? It'll be interesting to see if they go with that tactic again or if they kind of just let him run free. I'm not sure. But prior to that meeting, he had scores of 118 and 112 against the Demons. Nick Daicos played out of his skin last weekend against Brisbane, and he still only managed to 116. I mean, on one hand, it's great that he still was able to get to 116 against Brisbane. Not many people are actually able to do that. But on the other hand, he had to work very hard for that 116. So I guess some scores recently against Melbourne. Noah Anderson had the 122. Sam Flanders is 120. Jason Horne-Francis went off for 141. Bontempelli's 131. Butters 131, and that was the Bont 182. And Treloar 149. They've all cooked the Demons midfield, and that's only been the last 3 weeks. I could go back further, but some big scores just in the last 3 weeks against the Demons for inside midfielders. This round, look, it is nice that Daicos plays early because we can VC him and we can find a fallback captain if it doesn't work. Because if you put the VC on Daicos and he doesn't get tagged against this leaky midfield, this is going to be a monster score. Is it worth the risk, VCing someone that could get tagged? I'll leave that up to you to decide. My number 2 VC option is Noah Anderson. Noah Anderson is averaging 88 points per game away from Gold Coast this season. That's a disgusting mark. So why am I recommending him as a VC option this week, away from Melbourne? Well, his record against Richmond speaks for itself, with scores of 122, 144, 154 and 126 in their 4 career matchups. So Noah Anderson's played Richmond 4 times. He's never gone under 122. And 2 of those 4 games were in Melbourne, so he has done it there. And this season's Tigers team is even worse than when he played against them previously. They're currently the 3rd easiest matchup for inside mids over the last 5 games. Players such as Jai Newcomb, 162, Dylan Moore, 139, LDU, 140, and Nick Daicos, 147, have put some gigantic scores against Richmond recently. And look, Noah and the Gold Coast, they're out of finals, but they've still got plenty to play for this year. If they win this week, it will be the most successful season in the club's history. It'll be the first time that they've notched up 11 wins in the season. So surely Dimmer will be revving up the boys for one last spanking to be led by their best midfielder. So I think if you've got Noah Anderson, I wouldn't go anywhere near him with a captaincy, but for a VC, pretty high upside, could do worse. My number one VC option this week is Max Gawn. Max Gawn is back to some good form. He's leading a battling Melbourne squad. Scores of 130 and 177 against two easy opponents. And then a 97 against Jared Witts, who, look, Jared Witts is one of the hardest ruck opponents in the game. So to get a 97 against him, we'll take that. And Gawn still played very well watching it eye test-wise. And even with Melbourne's season done, he's got a point to prove by winning this game. You know, there's been a lot of questions in the media about the D's culture, and Gawn even said after the game, look, we're just going to put our head down, try and win these last two games, and he's going to be the driving force behind that. So I don't think Gawn will necessarily be checked out of the year. Darcy Cameron just gave up 131 points to Oscar McInerney, but prior to that, he did limit Brodie Grundy and Mark Pitnet to low 80s. The thing here, Collingwood haven't actually really played against any of the big premium in-form ruckmen since their bye. So it's actually really difficult to judge their form in that regard and kind of judge how restrictive Darcy Cameron is or not. But what we do know is that when Max Gawn wants to dominate a game, he just dominates the game. It doesn't matter who he's playing against. If he's motivated in this one, his 132 that he scored against the Pies in round 13 could very well be replicated. Max Gawn owners know his ceiling, and that alone makes him worth a VC option on the Friday night. Just because of that monster ceiling he's got, I think he's a great choice. Now my pod vice captain. We got another 120 plus pod VC recommendation last week with Noah Anderson getting the job done. This week we turn to a guy coming off a 104 and a 76. That might be a little bit risky, but he did have a 3-round average of 127 before that, and that guy is Tom Stewart. Tom Stewart's averaging 119 at GMHBA since his move into the midfield, and now coming up against the team that are giving up the most points to inside midfielders over the last 5 games, the West Coast Eagles, this looks really nice. The only hesitation I have here is that West Coast have actually been quite restrictive to defenders lately for some reason. Maybe that's because the ball's barely down there, I don't know. But with Stewart's role as a 70% CBA midfielder, I expect him to take advantage, much like Cripps, 142, Hewitt, 119, Powell, 123, Sheasel, 122, Rao, 122, Brayshaw, 137, and Young, 117. They've all done in the past, so they're just scores in the past month that have destroyed West Coast. So with a poor percentage, Geelong really need to win this week to lock up a top 4 berth. If they lose, they fall out of the top 4 most likely. So I expect the Cats and Tom Stewart to come out swinging in this one. And look, Tom's matchup with the Eagles last year led to a score of 135, and I'd be pretty confident he can hit that mark again in this one. Then we go to captain. So I've got 5 kind of safe fallback captain options for you. Number 5 is Lachie Neale. So Lachie Neale still managed 123 on the weekend, despite being tagged all game. His score was actually in the 130s before Collingwood kicked ahead and the match scaling at the end penalised him. This week, a matchup with Essendon, who are missing finals, and let's be honest, I don't think the Bombers have anything to play for. The Bombers have not been an easy team for inside midfielders to score against recently, but they haven't necessarily been restrictive. They're kind of in the middle of the pack. Heaney's 117, Mills's 97, Rao's 110, Brayshaw's 137, and Young's 125, and Steele's 136. They've all managed quite well, those guys. In amongst those scores, there have been some disappointing ones from some of the premiums. But what that kind of proves is that it isn't necessarily hard to score well against the Bombers. It's just that not everyone is doing it every week. So with a third Brownlow medal on the line, I really expect Lachie to be doing everything he can to try and get another 3 votes. Being at the Gabba also gives him a boost. It's a venue that he averages over 120 points per game at from a massive 55 career games. Let's just think about that for a minute. There aren't many players that average over 120 points per game at a venue they've only played 10 games at. let alone 55. Lachie Neale just loves the Gabba. Lachie Neale wants 3 votes for the Brownlow. I don't think Essendon will tag Neale, and therefore Neale should score well this weekend. And my number 4 captain option is Sam Flanders. He does play earlier in the week, so you could probably only use him on the captain if you went for one of those Friday night VCs like Dacos and Gawn. But the reason I've got Flanders here as the captain option because I think he's just a really safe, solid, 120-ish. I don't think he's going to go crazy for a VC like Noah Anderson could. I think he's just safety this week. Sam Flanders started the year as a defender, then he moved into the midfield for a period, and he's now become a forward. He's actually only attended 2 centre bounces in the past 2 weeks. That's important to note because he's not a midfielder anymore. He's playing a high half-forward role that allows him to push up the ground and get involved in scoring chains coming back towards goal. It has negatively affected his SuperCoach scoring, and his scoring has dropped off since his stint in the midfield is finished. He's getting a lot less disposals, but he's getting a lot more score involvement. So balancing it out a bit, but here a date with the flailing Richmond Tigers should lead to an abundance of scoring shots for the Suns. Last week, Flanders had 11 score involvements, and the week before he had 8. Both games he led the Gold Coast in that metric. And those, getting involved with those scoring chains usually leads to extra scoring SuperCoach points, especially if you're the one directly assisting the score. If he can get involved in over 10 scoring chances again this weekend, and to be honest, I think he should against the Tigers, then I think it's another safe 120 occurring for Stupid Sexy Flanders in round 24. He's been the model of consistency for us this year, and I think he's going to be super safe again here. Now, my number 3 captain option is Zach Butters. I've recommended Zach Butters a lot in the captaincy videos this year. I would say between Butters and Gawn, and maybe Bond as well, I reckon they're the 3 that I've recommended, week in, week out, most weeks. So they just keep making the cut. But I missed out on his 156 last week in the showdown against Adelaide. I considered it. I just didn't think he would go that well. So it happens, my bad. But I won't overlook him this week. A date with Fremantle at Optus Stadium. That is actually a pretty tough ask for any player. But Freo have actually been giving up plenty of points to midfielders over the last 5 games. DFS shows them as the 5th easiest club. But remember, that is heavily buoyed by Brent Daniels' 195 last weekend, so take that with a slight grain of salt. But even if we remove that score, Tom Green had a 143, Zach Merritt had a 116, Tim Kelly had a 139. So, they've been able to score well against the Dockers recently. If we look at all inside midfielders that have played against Freo in the past 4 weeks, we can see that on average, they've received a 4.3% boost to their current form. 4.3, it's not a big boost. But when you're in Zach Butters' current form, even a little boost like that gets him to a safe floor of 125. And if you look at an even smaller sample size, we can see that Zach has a 3-round average of 140. So he's in hot form. In the last SuperCoach game of the season, look, why not go back to Butters as a safe captaincy fallback? He deserves it after all of his work for us this year. My number 2 captaincy option is Rowan Marshall. I've been banging the Rowan Marshall drum for weeks now, saying that he's had a great SuperCoach finals run home, and look, he's delivered. Scores of 123, 135, 126, 126, and 146 in his last 5 games. He's got a 5-round average of 131. Now, in the final round of the season, a matchup with Carlton and Mark Pittonet. Pitto has been an interesting study recently. He's limited guys like Lloyd Meek and Darcy Cameron, but he's allowed the lesser rucks like Bailey Williams and Jordan Sweet to score way above their season average. So that does make me a little confused about whether Pittonet's restrictive or is easy. I think he's actually just in the middle and that he's just a kind of neutral matchup. He doesn't really restrict you. He doesn't really make it easy for you. He's just kind of in the middle. That seems fair. And a neutral matchup isn't going to be enough to slow down the hot streak that Rowan Marshall is on. What it means is that I'm not expecting a big 146 like he had last week, but I think it's a very safe captaincy fallback of, about 125, 130, something like that. I think that seems well within the realms of possibility for Marshall this week. But my number one captain option, again, this guy is the GOAT of post-buy 2024 SuperCoach, Tristan Cherry, no doubt about it. He's now the third highest scorer of the year, and he's a genuine chance to take the number 2 spot by the season's end. Tristan Cherry has a 3-round average of 157 and a 5-round average of 146. That is absolute insanity. He's destroyed whichever ruck has been put in his way, and this week it is Lloyd Meek in his way. A few weeks ago, Meek was listed as a very easy matchup for ruckman by DFS. Now it's actually showing him as only slightly positive matchup, but if we look into why, we can see that he hasn't really played a top-tier premium ruckman in a while, so that's kind of skewed the data and made him look a bit more restrictive when he's not really. None of his opponents have really set the world on fire against Meek in the past 3 weeks. But I remembered this happening and I was recommending people captain against him all the time. If we go back a bit further and get outside the recent data, we'll remember that there was a stretch of games all in a row where O'Brien went 124, Cameron went 132, Jackson went 116, De Koning went 125, Nankervis went 131, Briggs went 124, O'Brien again went 111, and McInerney went 113. That's a massive stretch of games where all these ruckmen, not even these premium ruckmen, just regular ruckmen, absolutely destroyed Meek. And if we want to find some data where the real premium big dogs faced Meek this season, Marshall had a 164 on him, English had a 135, Cherry himself earlier in the year had a 144, and Gawn had a 113. So what I'm saying here is don't let the recent DFS data fool you. Lloyd Meek is not a restrictive matchup, and Tristan Cherry is going to continue to have his way with him. Lock it in. Now, as I've done the last few weeks, if you're playing draft or you don't have any of those guys, more likely if you're playing draft and you want a captain, here's some guys with favourable matchups that didn't quite make the cut, but I think should still kind of above their average. Stephen May, if he's back, I don't know what his injury status is, but if he's back, matchup with Collingwood's nice. Also really like Jack Viney, Jeremy Cameron, Brian Myers, Jeremy McGovern, Elliot Yeo, Daniel Rioli, Jared Witts, Dylan Moore, Nick Martin, Mason Redman, Dane Zorko, Isaac Heaney, Riley O'Brien, Mitch Hinge, Lockie Whitfield, Kieran Briggs, Nick Newman, Sam Walsh, Patrick Cripps, and Connor Rozee. I think some of those guys should have some good scores this week. So if you've got any of them in a draft league, I think you could be pretty okay with captaining them. Now for my quick recap that people like me to do that don't want to listen to the whole thing and just want to skip to the end. I do think this will be a tough week for captaincy. We've been blessed with some big scores over the past fortnight, but I think settling for a safe 125 VC might be the way to go this week. If you want a Friday night VC, then I think Gawn and Dacos are good options, especially with their high upside. And I really like the 2 Gold Coast boys of Flanders and Anderson against Richmond. Tom Stewart should run amok against the Eagles at GMHBA, and he is my pod VC this week. And if you want a safe fallback option, I think all of Lachie Neale, Rowan Marshall, and Zach Butters will get the job done. But I'm happy to go out on record again this week and say that I think all Tristan Cherry owners need to save your VC for him on the Saturday Arvo. For the 3rd week in a row, he's my number 1 captaincy option. For the 3rd week in a row, I think he could be one of the highest scorers of SuperCoach. So if you own Cherry, I wouldn't waste your VC on the Friday. Save it for him, please. Now, my moves, I'm likely going to be using Zach Butters as my fallback captain option on the Sunday. So I've got 2 options. I can either VC the safe Flanders and go for that kind of safe 120, or I can go for the high upside, low floor of Dacos VC and hope that he doesn't get tagged. At this stage, I'm leaning probably towards going for the high ceiling Dacos into Butters, but I'll see how I'm feeling Friday and probably see, if Melbourne come out and tell us they're going to tag Dacos or not. That might influence me. Good luck this weekend, and if you're in any league grand finals, I hope you get the win. And as I said earlier, thank you for all the support this year. It's been a blast. I've loved doing it, and I hope you've loved listening to it.